The city of Dublin is Ireland's capital. And at the centre of Dublin stands Leinster House. It contains our National Art Gallery, our National Library, and our National Museum. It is also the home of Irish government.
The National Broadcasting Company presents a conversation with a leading statesman of the Republic of Ireland, the Honourable Eamon de Valera, and Professor Curtis Baker Bradford, visiting lecturer in American literature at Trinity College, Dublin.
Inside Leinster House, you find the chamber where the Dáil meet. The Dáil is our House of Representatives. Inside Leinster House is also the Senate chamber and a number of offices, including this one.
It seems to me, Mr. de Valera, that I've really found the heart of Ireland. Could you tell me the present population of Ireland, Mr. de Valera?
4 1/3 millions, I think.
And how large is the country?
We were always told as children that it was the size of Lake Superior.
I believe that's still in your geography books. I've heard my children mention that over the supper
I
table.
haven't looked at these books in recent times.
Irish is spoken here by a good many of the people. I wonder, do you speak Irish?
Some, yes.
And where did you learn the language, sir?
I learned it mainly in the Gaelic League. I didn't have it from my childhood. As you know, I was born in the United States. And though I did come to Ireland at the age of 2.5, still I didn't learn the language. It was spoken, though, by my grandmother and people of that generation. But the next generation lost the language in the main.
Could you say something in Irish for us so we could hear how the language sounds?
Es marig nach nienen corlia javano.
And that means?
Woe to him who doesn't follow the advice of a good woman.
Very gallant in the Irish temperament. Are you always gallant to the ladies?
No, I don't say that. We have problems of an opposite direction. For example, Mas mian lath eni doget, inish tavni maruni. If you wish to publicize anything, tell it to a woman as a secret.
Well, I think that's true in all countries. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the work of the Gaelic League.
Well, the Gaelic League was founded, I think, back in 1893. Its purpose was to try to, by getting the people to realize the importance of the language, to learn it and restore it before it was too late. You see, the language is spoken traditionally and continuously for generations in certain parts of the country.
The language movement is very closely tied in with the movement for Irish independence, is it not?
That is so. Our modern national resurgence may be dated back to the establishment of the Gaelic League.
I wonder if you could just go over some of the principal events in recent Irish history, beginning with those that led up to the Easter Rising of 1916.
Well, of course, to start with, as I've said, you had the establishment of the Gaelic League, which made people nationally conscious. And then you had the failure of the Home Rule movement, the British government having got the support of the British people in the first instance, and then the British Parliament, and the British government failed to put the bill into the Home Rule Bill of 1912, I think it was introduced into operation. Then you had the resistance to that bill in the north, in Belfast, and the formation of the Carson Volunteers. And down here, that was answered by the, well, not so much answered, but there was a parallel movement down here where the Irish Volunteers were formed. And in 1916, there was the uprising.
What were the principal events of the uprising, sir? Just a few of them.
Well, it was concentrated mainly in Dublin. You had the proclamation of the Republic from the post office here.
That's right in the center of the city.
It's right in the center of the city, yes. And then after that, there was the surrender. And later then you had the re-establishment of, at least reorganization of the volunteers in 1917. Next you had the formation of the great political movement, that period, 1917, the Sinn Féin movement, which resulted in getting an overwhelming vote for Irish independence in the general elections of 1918.
Did you play a part in the Easter Rising, Mr. de Valera?
Yes, I was a commandant of a certain area here in the city.
I know you were captured and then released. What happened then?
Well, I told you, you see, that there was the reorganization of 1917 of the volunteers. There was the establishment of the Sinn Féin organization. There was the elections of 1918. Then there was the meeting of the elected members here. There was an overwhelming majority, as I said, in favor of the establishment of a republic. Then you had the members who were elected meeting here in Dublin and proclaiming the independence of the country and setting up a government.
And I believe, sir, if my memory serves me correctly, that you were elected president of the Provisional Irish Republic.
Well, I don't like that word provisional. We were elected by the duly elected representatives of the country. We were a government which was founded democratically on the vote of the people and on the vote of their elected representatives in Parliament. So we were the elected and democratically formed government of the people of this country.
And I believe it was at that point that you returned to the United States, was it not?
I was elected president in 1919, and then about June of that year, I went to the United States with two objectives. One was to seek official recognition for the republic that had been declared, and the other was to float a loan to finance the government of the republic.
How were you welcomed in America, Mr. de Valera?
Oh, everywhere our cause was received with great sympathy by very large audiences in all the principal cities of the United States.
Was your mission successful?
Well, so far as the loan was concerned, we got, I think, something like over $6 million subscribed, and from that point of view, could be regarded as success. As far as recognition was concerned, we didn't succeed in getting official recognition, but there were resolutions of the Senate and resolutions of various state legislatures in favor of Ireland, and there was a very, very great feeling in the United States that Ireland should, that the right of self-determination, and that Ireland had exercised self-determination, that the right which had been promised by President Wilson should be accorded.
Were you alone on your mission?
No, I had a number of colleagues, in fact, but my nearest colleague, one who was closest to me, worked most closely with me, was Mr. Bull. See his picture there on the mantelpiece.
And whose picture is that?
That's Polly Pierce, our first president, was commander-in-chief of the Republican forces in Easter Week 1916.
What happened to him, Mr. de Valera?
He was shot following the surrender.
And I understand that you too were sentenced to death.
Yes, my sentence was commuted.
And a few years later, American newspapers ran captions, "Is Mr. de Valera a candidate for the presidency of the United States?"
Newspaper men must have their jokes. That was because I was campaigning in the United States at the same time as the presidential election campaign was in full progress.
Is that briefcase the one you had with you, sir? It looks old enough.
No, this is an old friend indeed. It's 20 years old, but it's not the one that I had in the United States of America. If you're interested in that, I think I could show you the actual case that I had in the United States. This is the one I had in my journeys in the United States. I had it during the whole period 1919 to 21 there, and then I had it in the negotiations in London, and I had it in subsequent visits to the United States.
It's kind of a souvenir then of your
Well,
trips.
to a large extent it is a souvenir.
But this is the briefcase you used.
Yes, this is the one that I ordinarily use. As I told you, I had it some over 20 years. You see, I got the idea when I was at the League of Nations. I saw some members of the French delegation, and in particular the President Elio. He used to have a case like this, and he was able to take out the papers and work on it without putting it aside, disturbing anybody. So I thought the idea a good one, and I got this case made when I came back. It's very handy. You don't have to push it about or anything. You can take out, you can work on it, you can take out the papers out from the different departments and leave it there, and it's ready for action at any time.
I suppose that case has seen many of the important documents connected with Irish history.
In recent times it has seen some undoubtedly, but we have had important papers and some that weren't so important.
Well, in your lifetime, Mr. de Valera, you've seen many of Ireland's serious problems solved. I wonder if there are serious problems remaining.
Oh yes, there are. There is first of all the problem of the restoration of our language to be the spoken language of our people. We've referred to that already. And then there is the problem of restoring the unity of our country, the problem of partition as it's commonly called. As you know, a portion of our country was cut off. 6 of the 32 counties of the national territory were cut off by a British Act of Parliament in 1920. And we are naturally anxious to bring about the restoration of the unity of the country as a whole.
As I understand it, the Irish Constitution provides for the...
Oh yes, the provision is made. We regard the whole of Ireland as the national territory. It has been, it's a natural entity. It has been national territory for thousands of years, and the country was one unit until 1920.
Would you consider partition merely an Irish problem? It seems to me that in recent times many countries have been divided, often against their will, usually against their will.
Usually against their will, that is so. It seems it's a very facile solution for statesmen when they have a problem like that to pretend that as a minority problem or other reason to cut off a portion of the country. But it usually solves nothing. It doesn't solve minority problems very often because it creates 2 minority problems instead of one. It doesn't lead to anything like a permanent peace. You see it today. You have the case of Germany. You have the case of Poland. You have the case of Palestine.
And
you have the case of Korea, of course, and now Indochina. And they are purely temporary expedients that lead to no final solutions. So that I have been on every occasion this question of proposed partition of the country has risen. I've been always against it as a solution.
Do you see a solution for the particularly Irish problem of partition?
Well, I've suggested solutions more than once. I've said very well, we can have an all-Ireland Parliament here, where there are a majority up in the northeastern portion of the country. They could have the present Parliament as a local Parliament. And they could be represented, get full proportional representation in United Ireland. See, one of the difficulties is that the portion cut off doesn't represent the areas where there is a local majority who desire to be cut off. Mm-hmm. The fact is that the greater part of the, well, one half the area, which is the area immediately adjoining us, they want to be with us. So that if there was a division of this country in accordance with political opinion, the boundary would not run as it runs at present. Mm-hmm. And the solutions we have suggested seem to be the natural ones. All it would require would be a transference to an all-Ireland Parliament of the powers which are at present retained in the Westminster Parliament.
Mr. de Valera, many Americans, and not only Americans of Irish origin, have been interested in the aspirations of the Irish nation.
It isn't in recent times alone that Americans have shown interest in Ireland. In Washington's time, when there was also a struggle for independence here, Washington addressed a message to those who were struggling. I had it repeated many a time by our friends in the United States. I don't know whether I can repeat it now. I think it ran something like this: Patriots of Ireland, be strong in hope. Your cause is identical with mine. You are calumniated in your day. I was misrepresented by the loyalists of my day. Had I failed, the scaffold would be my doom. Now my enemies do me honor. Had I failed, I would have deserved the same honor. I was true to my cause even when victory had fled. In that I merited success. You must do likewise. That was, I think, a very encouraging message to our people at that time, and I must say it was a heartening message every time I heard it in the United States afterwards.
A little earlier, we were talking about some of the difficulties Ireland faces today. I wonder what solution you see to these problems. How would you like to see Ireland develop in the immediate future?
Well, two things, what is likely to happen, what I would like to see happen. Naturally, I would like to see the material resources developed here so as to provide a livelihood for as many as possible, so that our people would not have to go abroad for their livelihood. That would mean the development of natural resources, the utilization of our natural resources to the full, the development of our industries. That has taken place. How far we can, by these means, provide the livelihoods that are necessary is a question. Of course, our area is limited and our resources are limited. But there is a direction in which we can make up for what we lose, what we lack in the material line, and that is in this we have spiritual resources which can be of great value and have proved of great value in the world in the past.
I have been impressed since I came to Ireland a few weeks ago by the religious freedom that exists here.
Well, we have a tradition of religious toleration. As you know, we respect other people's consciences and views, religious views. I think in 1871, Chief Rabbi of the Jews speaking here said he was delighted to come to Ireland because it was the one country in which his people had not been persecuted. And on every occasion in which the really Irish got control of affairs, their first acts was to proclaim religious toleration. So that we today, we are simply marching in the footsteps of those who went before us.
I wonder, sir, if you would be willing to say just a word about Ireland's role in world affairs now, the difficult problem of the small nation in a world dominated by great powers.
The small nations have a great interest in peace. They have nothing to gain by wars and have everything to lose. So there will always be an influence for peace.
In your long and active life, you must have met many impressive people.
Well, of course I did. I met quite a number of outstanding statesmen in Europe. But I prefer not to comment on these. Many of them are still alive. But the person who interested me most was one I never met, Gandhi. I regretted very much that I didn't meet him when he was here in our neighborhood on one occasion. But I've admired him for the way in which he led his people over a long period, and also for the sacrifices which he suffered for, which he made for the welfare of his people. There's no doubt that he was perhaps the most outstanding figure during the period that I've been in public life.
Mr. de Valera, various people have compared you with Lincoln from time to time. I wonder if it's ever occurred to you that there are parallels between you and Lincoln.
Oh, I've heard Americans say that, but for myself, I find it difficult to see the comparative point of comparison. I'd be very flattered indeed if I thought I had any of the qualities of Lincoln. He was a great president, a splendid leader of his country, and above all, as far as history records it, he was a good man.
I was interested, while reading a biography of you, about a story that it told there, the effect that you disclaimed much knowledge of politics.
Well, it depends what you mean by politics. I think politics has been defined by somebody as the science of the practical. To me, the chief aim of men political life should be to adapt means to desirable ends, to have noble ideals and try to get the practical means then to achieve these ideals.
Americans, like people throughout the world, are anxious about the future and the threat of war. Has your long experience shown you a method of solving political problems without resort to war?
Well, we're all anxious, naturally, about the situation. The means other than violence have often been put forward before. That is, judicial determination of disputes where possible, and where that is not possible, arbitration. But you want to have common agreement on these methods of determining disputes, and unfortunately we haven't got it. If you haven't these means, you're always in danger of attempts to solve irritating and exasperating problems by force. But we ought to have been taught now, first of all, that force does not get a final solution, and with modern weapons, it will be very hard to distinguish victor from vanquished, I fear, if force is used.
While we've been talking, sir, I've noticed that rosette on your lapel.
Oh, my Fornia. If you look, it's not a rosette, it's a simple circle, a simple ring. The Irish word for it is Fornia. And are you prepared for a long story?
Certainly, certainly.
Well, you probably observed as you went round the streets of Dublin, you observed young people and old people too, wearing metal rings. Some are gold and some silver. Now, these are indications that the person who wears them speaks Irish. The gold one indicates a certain standard and carries with it, for the bearer, certain obligations, namely to speak Irish to those who have a similar ring. The silver also has obligations and indicates a standard not so high. Now, I felt that we needed, in order that beginners might use whatever degree of fluency they had acquired in the language, might use it, that there should be a mark which would indicate, I know some Irish, I'm very anxious to speak it, would you please speak it to me? Sort of third order, as I might say. So suggested that we should have something. Gold cost money, silver cost money, and I thought that the cheapest thing that one could get was just plain embroidery. Anybody can come and get the tailor to put that on their coat, and each time they order a suit, he can have it embroidered. The origin of it was rather interesting. I was particularly satisfied in my own mind that the women would all do it very readily, because I thought they were well able to do it with a needle. But some friends warned me that they had very many dresses and very many colors, and it wasn't such an easy thing as a man would think. However, I held on to my idea, and I tried to get some people to make it, to embroider it, and I'm afraid that the first samples I got were not encouraging. It isn't so easy to make a good circle. However, I wasn't to be put off, so I went to one of my daughters-in-law and I took off my coat and I said, could you put a ring on that for me? Could you embroider a ring? So she said, oh, certainly. And I was rather hoping, in a sense, that there would be a failure, just for the fun. But to my amazement, she had a fountain pen in her hand like this. She took off the cap and put it down on a powder puff, or rather, I think they call it a compact. And she put it on to the coat, like that, got a very nice circle in white, and proceeded at once to embroider this ring. So you see then that it's simply a sign that one speaks the Irish language, one is anxious to be spoken to in that language, and it helps to get the language spoken generally.
Mr. de Valera, I sincerely hope that Ireland will be able to fulfill her destiny as you foresee it.
Well, there's an old Irish book, there's a couplet. I think it runs something like this: Homo epit in cachri arledje frieren ui. And that in modern Irish would be something, I think, like Bavor la ra in nachri pagnedje frieren o.
And in English?
In English, it would run something, I think, like this: Greater than all telling in every age has been God's counsel and providence for Virgin Ireland.
And Professor Curtis Baker Bradford, visiting lecturer at Trinity College, Dublin, was filmed in Ireland in Mr. de Valera's office.